live. This is Oleg and Darren again. This will be episode 4 of the X-Files. Seeing as the last 2 were based on blending and the gray man concept, followed by surveillance and counter-surveillance, we are, on Oleg's recommendation, going to do the final leg of the tripod on residential security. So I'll greet Oleg and send my regards and let him give the parameters on the direction of where we're going to start on the conversation.
Well, all right. Hi all. It's always a pleasure to be invited again. We decided to talk about, I guess, home security or something like that.
Yep.
Home preservation from the perspective of surveillance and counter-surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to start with, this topic is quite interesting and basically is totally uncovered anywhere. We can find many materials regarding graymanship, but we will find very few of them regarding how to arrange your home or your residence.
Agreed.
That's why I decided that this topic is worth mentioning, at least.
No, agreed. I'm up for anything, you know that. Do you want to, where do you want to start off on this topic? What area do you want to begin with? And then we can branch off from there.
First of all, as usual, I would like to draw some borders.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Home and residence security. Here we will not talk about some video surveillance, cameras, and etc.
Okay.
We are going to cover simple things that every common person can actually apply. And
Okay.
this topic is more about the state of mind. First of all, as usual, it is, in my opinion, it is very terrain dependent. Your country, your social level, your region, your district, your neighborhood. In some places, it is more convenient and it is more useful to show that your house is highly secured, like fences, barbed wire, cameras, etc. And in other districts, this will draw an unnecessary attention. So it all depends. Sometimes it is easier to be like any other else in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I know we get comments from guests all the time that are insecure when they first land because houses here are I mean, it's fairly universal to see individual houses with barbed wire on the top or spikes at the top of a fence, but very rarely is a property not fenced in some way with some kind of high. And when I mean high, I don't mean high level. I mean like height-driven gate and prohibitive measures that are attached to it. I mean, everywhere in Central America, you're going to find that. It's not abnormal in any way, shape, or form. And the strategies of people that try and subvert those, the criminals, the home invaders, burglars, robbers, matches that. I mean, they have strategies on how to get around that, get over it, and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, here, that's the profile. I mean, people have gates, they have barbed wire or spikes, and the gates are usually traditionally high to prevent vision from inside. So that's a common theme here, at least.
Basically, this is the stuff I saw in many countries with a rather high criminal rate.
Yep.
And from my perspective and from my experience, the thing is, we should, like you, Darren, always mention, we should reverse engineer the potential burglar.
Agreed fully.
First, they are always very pressed in regards of time. They are not going to burglary like to walking in the park. They know that they should do everything quickly.
Yep.
And this is the first point in regards of home security. We should visually let the potential burglar know one of two things, either the first or the second. The first one, that we have basically nothing to steal.
Nothing
It's
of
the
value.
first thing. And the second, that breaking into that house or that apartment will be very time consuming and not worth it because of this fact.
Yep. I'd agree with
So
that.
sometimes high fences and gates, etc., work.
They do, but to me, at least here in this environment, there are some intangibles that go with that. We should also note that, I mean, at least in my environment, home invasions and burglaries are crimes of opportunity. And they are usually capitalized on by an error that the homeowner makes that allows the burglar to believe that they can capitalize on it. They can see very clearly that you're not there. They can see very clearly that there are multiple escape routes. They can see very clearly that you're inattentive to particular details. They can see very clearly that you have some valuables that are worth their time to steal. And their idea is in and out. I mean, they're in there and they're out quickly. So those are some intangibles that they look for. So, I mean, when you take things like valuables out of the line of sight, you prohibit certain vantage points from them seeing inside your property. You make it seem, at least by perception or by actuality, that it's difficult to get in and out of your property fast, and escape routes are not particularly accessible. And you make it look like it's an active property, that you're home, even if you're not. Generally, they tend to avoid you. And even the violent home invasions that I've heard of firsthand from people that have given me anecdotes, the error that the homeowner made, and we're not shaming the homeowner. I mean, nobody deserves to get, violated or assaulted or robbed, for that matter, is very clear at the very beginning of the story that I'm being told. So, I mean, they are most of the time preventable unless the thief is utterly desperate and beyond reproach.
So, I guess we can talk about what we should expose and what we should not in the context of your last speech regarding homeowners' mistakes, or you want to delve a bit more deeply into the possible mistakes a homeowner could make.
I mean, we can do both. I mean, I can give a quick anecdote. I mean, some of the burglaries that I've seen were very preventable, and I mean, these are classic gringo or North American faults. One is believing that you're in small town Illinois still, and you leave the gate open or leave the back door open unattended, and you're off doing something in the garden, and people walk in, and they will hear. The other is going on the street and projecting that you have some sort of cash by wearing a jewelry, an expensive watch or a chain or a ring, uh, fairly expensive clothing. I mean, those are two examples. One that I've heard of a violent home invasion from somebody that I knew, and the other from somebody that I knew that was robbed aggressively on the street. And one person told me they've been robbed, that Costa Rica is horrible for violence, and they've been robbed 7 or 8 times in the last 8 years that they've lived here. And I mean, to me, if you've been mugged 8 times, it's not the culture, it's you. It is clearly something that you're projecting or not doing correctly or drawing attention to yourself. I mean, there's just no other way around it. I mean, if you've been targeted 8 times and successfully taken out from that targeting, it's not them, it's you. So I mean, those are a few examples. I mean, there's a big list that we can do, but let's go on to the area that you wanted to address.
You reminded me
Where you go with
one
that.
anecdote from my life. Sometimes robbers can be just desperate.
Yes.
It happened to me in Spain when a guy, an immigrant, tried to get my sack from my shoulder, and when he couldn't, from his first attempt, he decided to carry on doing it. I was like, come on, man, you already failed, get away.
Yeah.
But, well, basically I had to hit him and call the police. Because that guy desperately tried to get my sack.
Yeah, there's always that risk. But if you've been mugged 8 times, I doubt it's from 8 different desperate people. I mean, it's one of those relationship things. It's not me, it's you.
Yeah.
I just don't buy that you can get mugged 8 times and it's not you. It's just always unfortunate circumstances or sequences of events. I mean, that's just not the case. Anyways, you were going to move on to what to expose, what to hide. You were going in that route, correct?
Yep. My favorite thing is to merge into your neighborhood, to be
Yes.
just like any other house or any other apartment in the region. But
That would be without the meth lab then, right?
well, why not? The fact is that I like most of all to uncover interesting things behind the common facade. For example, here, regardless of the lowest crime rate in Europe, we have every apartment has metal doors.
Mhm.
It is it comes from the 90s, where there were gang wars along all the territory of the former Soviet Union.
Mhm.
So everyone here has a metal door to the apartment. But there are of very different quality, and usually people here have very thin ones, metal, but still metal, but thin. And in
Mhm.
my case, I have in my apartment, I have a huge, complicated door. Well, I'm a paranoid, yes, so it has additional things that prevent it from being broken or pulled away or something like that.
Mhm.
But the fact is that I chose the door that looks like any other door.
Mhm.
For example, like my neighbors.
Mhm. We
Uh,
we have, at least here on the property.
I
Sorry, go ahead.
recommend. So I recommend to think over how you can implement some additional security measures to a house without showing them off.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
We
basically, I never understood that the United States of America thing with very thin wooden doors with glass.
Mhm.
It's, well, I don't know.
We here on the property at least have very heavy doors that do not have a handle on the outside. So if the door is locked, you need a key to get in, or you'll have to break a window. So I mean, they're problematic just based on functionality, but they're also heavy. They also make a lot of noise, and they're not particularly easy to. I mean, if it's locked, you have a big problem. So, I mean, those are one things too. I mean, you had asked what things to expose. Normalcy is definitely one of them. I mean, when you project that you look like every other house, or you take vantage points away from that house, those are benefits. But I mean, I like even little small things. Like we have some of them aren't a guarantee, but when you start combining different elements, they have a psychological effect on people that are staking your place out. And we've had various people staking this place out that I've caught in the past few years, at least 4 or 5 that I can think of. We have an alarm sticker on the outside of our property. It's a sticker, but it often leads people to believe that there is a high-tech alarm system inside. We like a kempt, taken care of garden, which insinuates that people are home and caring for the place, as opposed to overgrowth and lack of care of the yard, which may insinuate that the homeowner is not there or not there all the time. Leaving lights on when you leave. Even the idea, and this is going to sound kind of silly, but leaving some dog shit around the yard so that if people are scoping it out and taking a look inside, they get the vibe that there's an animal present. Not a violent animal that can attack them, but um, even something that will alert people to their presence is somewhat of a deterrent, at least.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. I would like to add that the majority of professional burglars that I met, they usually mention that the dogs are not dangerous because they can bite you. The dogs are dangerous because they can bark.
yeah, yeah. And another thing I was going to say that you can expose, it depends on who your neighbors are and how much you like them, but your neighbors. I mean, if you look less innocuous, if you look more innocuous than your neighbors, if you look less a target than your neighbors, you've accomplished your main goal already. I mean, we have a bunch of neighbors on the block here that are far more exposed. They have easier vantage points and more safe escape avenues. They have less cover and concealment in front for the home, meaning that there's greater for the potential burglar. They're less protected in terms of they have easy ins and outs as an avenue. There are no gates. They like the open area. And there are lots of places that are accessible to a burglar that has a little bit of time. And some of them have been robbed in the last couple of years. We, knock on wood, have not as of yet. Which leads me to a point. I mean, we've had a few people on the roof in the middle of the night previously. And one thing I've never understood is I always hear from people like potential homeowners when they hear stories of burglars or potential robbers on their roofs. You hear them talk on Facebook or on social media about if that was my home, I'd go out and kick that fucker's ass. And your property better than anybody. You know the ins and the outs and the little areas of hiding and the pratfalls that people can fall into. You're safe in your house with that big door that's problematic. Why, tactically, would you take yourself out of an area of safety to engage a burglar that you know nothing about in the dark, whether he's armed or not, and voluntarily put yourself in the line of fire? I mean, to me, the best place to be is inside my house, and I'll wait there until you become a threat to the inside of that house itself. And nobody knows the inside of that house in the dark better than I do. So, I mean, to me, it's the minute you hear a guy talk like that, that's a huge tactical disadvantage from somebody who clearly has never experienced these things and thought them through. What are your thoughts?
Agreed, though from my personal perspective, dependent on my mood, I can assume that there could be times that I will not be able to stand the attraction of sneak out of the property that I know at night and
I
show
have
the
is
guy who is the real shadow here.
no, I would be lying if I said I haven't done the same. That when you've heard somebody outside the gate, you get the jump on them and go out into the yard and you know all the crooks and crannies and cover and concealment and places of exposure and non-exposure when they're on their way in. But if you already, to me, if you already have a guy on the roof, um, I don't feel the need to go rushing out and put myself at a disadvantage. Tactically, to me, it's not particularly bright. I'm in the place of strength. He's not. He's
Yeah,
trying to get in. I have all the advantages. I have the advantage of surprise. I have the advantage that he doesn't know who I am. He thinks that I'm sleeping and not a threat. He doesn't know the inside of my house whatsoever. Um, I'm conscious of his presence. I mean, there are so many advantages to that scenario that, I mean, somebody that says, oh, I'm going to go run out. Uh,
but
if you're running out when somebody's just breaking onto the property, that's a different element. I mean, you're getting the jump on a potential problem that, before it becomes one. But when he's already there, I mean, those are two different scenarios to me that people have to distinguish. And the guy on the roof thing, it's a wait and see. And I mean, we've never had anybody actually attempt or intimate that they wanted to get in the house at that point. So there's never been a reason to do anything. Why would I? Why would I put myself at risk when I'm totally in control?
agreed. And you reminded me one more thing. Uh, Sometimes people lack thinking over the security measures that your neighbors did in terms of how they could reflect on you.
Mm-hmm.
A good example is Russia. From the 90s, to prevent burglars, the inhabitants of the ground floors of apartment blocks, they placed metal shields on their windows.
Mm-hmm.
Metal shields, metal bars, something, anything to prevent going to their ground floor apartment by the window.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that the burglars never broke into the ground floor apartments after that. They broke into the first floor apartments. And they used these shields and these bars just to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, here we have bars.
of course, the guys from the first floors, they never realized that it could happen. So
Well, tactically, that's a big advantage here because we don't have basements. We
yeah,
don't have basements and we don't have second floors traditionally, unless it's a really rich foreigner that happens to move here and doesn't know any better. But the majority of Tico houses here are one floor. They have no basement. They have direct accessibility, and the doors and windows are made of bars. So, I mean, there have been burglars that have circumvented that by using little kids. And those are the only people that can fit through that window, the size of that window, if they choose to break it. Adults cannot. So, I mean, they found a way around it with kids that they utilize and manipulate. But I mean, the mentality of, a kid burglar is also flawed too and has a lot of inherent risks. But for a quick slash and go when your homeowner isn't home, that's one way to subvert that protection barrier. But for adult groups, those are very hard to get in. And the fact that there's no basement, the weakness in Canada is that one of the houses that we used to live in had an alarm system that covered downstairs. So if anybody would break in through one of the lower windows, that alarm system would go off. But that alarm system didn't transfer to the main floor. So if they broke in on the main floor, the alarm system didn't trigger.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, tactically ridiculous, but such as it is.
But well, if they have a couple of pit bulls on the upper floor, then it's all right.
Yeah. Just
And
an add-on to this, one of the, I mean, if you're a homeowner, note that you have all of the advantages ahead of time. You have, if you're awake before the person gets in the house, you have the element of time. You have the blueprint and layout of your property. You know the vantage points and the entry knowledge. You generally have the element of surprise if you're paying attention and if there's some kind of noise. You have the element of sound where you know what sounds represent. Here, I know exactly what gate is being opened based on the sounds that it projects. I know that there are different surface levels here. I know that there are different types of surfaces that give people away that blend into each other. I know what a pressing of the metal gate does. I know when the big gate outside opens, and I know when a car enters. I mean, those are all elements that you have the advantages of knowledge. You know your property. And the fact that you should study that property and reverse engineer what you would do if you were a burglar, again, gives you a lot of foresight on these things happening, apart from the general precautions that you can take that people often don't. I mean, we had a neighbor here that was determined to leave her front door and back door open because that's the way she lived when she grew up, and God damn it, why would I change? And I mean, times are changing. If you don't want to change with them, that's one thing. You're welcome to leave both of your doors open unattended when you're not home. You're welcome to leave your purse and your wallet on the couch when you go out. It's fine. But also accept the responsibility that those are draws and that there will be eventually people taking advantage of that because we no longer live in that society. And it's not being paranoid to acknowledge that. It's common
the
sense
way
to
this
take knowledge of
case,
that.
this is a very popular. This is a very popular problem with the tourists in Thailand. When they rent a house, they forget to lock every door there when they are out. That's why the home burglary is very popular in Thailand in touristic areas.
Mm-hmm. Even the flaws and faults of your neighbors can be a deterrent or a distraction from your own home. I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but if neighbors make mistakes and they're very glib with their personal security, that can benefit you. Depends on how well you know your neighbors, I guess. But once again, uh, your neighbor geotagging and GPSing and giving TMI, too much information on social media, um, can make him or her vulnerable. Having an open visioned yard, um, giving clear vantage points away, being very lax with personal security can make you less of a target because your neighbor doesn't understand the game as well as you do. So, I mean, just a little add on there.
And a simple thing, just spend some time in looking at your windows from the outside to see what part of the room is exposed, is visible, and then decide what to put there.
Yeah, once again, I think the major thing that we're both trying to get across is put yourself in the shoes of the robber. What would you pay attention to were you actually legitimately in a position trying to break into this house? What things would make it easier? What things would make it more difficult? What things would present problems to you? What things would you need to know in advance? and look at your own property and see if it fulfills that, or if it would be a little bit more difficult. Um,
Well,
like you
mine
said,
is.
even knowing I find knowing my neighbors and interacting actively with them when I go out in public, just to get a feel for what's going on in the neighborhood. Is there a band running around or a gang that's breaking into houses? What's the drug situation? Um, you know, why were the cops here last week? What happens with the parties? What kind of element lives on the street generally? I mean, just finding out that general information puts you in the loop and gives you some prep time.
And of course you can leave some surprises, preventing guys from going further.
Expand.
But it depends on the situation in that region. I don't mean different tribes, etc. Just psychological stuff. For example, uh, when you enter my apartment, the first thing you see is a black beret with a SWAT team insignia.
Mm-hmm.
So a burglar would think twice after that.
Well, anybody breaking into our yard automatically sees my training area, where there's a dummy pulley system for impact training, some training tools, not some non-dangerous training tools lying around. So you immediately get the impression again that psychological, this person could be a hard mark, or potentially uh, more problematic than is worth it if you're wanting to be in and out. If you're a
Depends.
low order predator, if you're a low order predator and your goal is simply to rob the house, that is problematic. Just like the idea of the dog shit, having that presence of a dog on the yard, that's an alert. That's your first line of defense, is a deterrent. Open areas where there are no bushes to hide or gain vantage point is a deterrent. High spikes and high barbed wire fence is a deterrent. Not being able to see inside whether there's anything worth being of value to steal or take that risk is a deterrent. So, I mean, we always hear about layers of defense, and that is what we're referring to generally. And the thing that's often left out is that you are your last line of defense. Once they've passed all of those other layers, it's on you. Um, I mean, have you personally taken all the precautions to manage elements like that? You want to add to that?
Though I would like to add that we should not go into extremes with the security measures, because to some extent they will tell the potential burglar that you have something valuable. If you have a very complicated security measures,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Yep.
So your house is definitely worth breaking in. Not
Yep.
today, not tomorrow, but it is worth.
Yep.
And probably a very complicated and a very exposed security system would cause a planned burglary, not a burglary of opportunity, but a planned one,
Mm-hmm.
premeditated.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that. I
And
think the layers of defense have to
in
be
case
innocuous.
and in case of a premeditated burglary, there would be professionals.
Mm-hmm. But
So
I think if you, I think if those layers of defense, uh, like you said, are very general and low key, that uh, you have a very basic gate. Remember here that having a gate and barbed wire is, I mean, all classes have that. It's not the upper class that have that. So I mean, if you don't have a house that looks particularly interesting, you don't have a lot of vantage points inside that property. There's not a lot of valuables that are showing. I mean, for us, even our car is impossible to see from the street. Um, you have areas where escape routes are somewhat problematic and take time. The dog is there. The brush and the flora and the fauna on the yard are not particularly thick. so that you don't have a lot of cover and concealment. That's what we mean by layers of defense. I'm not talking about layers of defense like a trained guard dog, security personnel, a high level alarm system. That immediately invokes worth breaking into. But I mean, for an average middle class to lower middle class or even low class house, there are simple ways that are not even inexpensive, but pretty much free that you can do to draw attention away from your house. Or at least, like we said in the last podcast, give apertures where you can see out and they can't see in. Take away vantage points that they can't see inside your property and they don't know, when they can see the neighbor has cash and leaves all kinds of things of value outside. That escapes because of that lack of vision are problematic. I mean, those are all things that are fairly generic and can be done very easily.
In case of a house, I would also recommend to use different kinds of plants
Yep.
to give you additional security. For example, in the region where I was born, in the countryside, people got used to grow juniper in front of their windows.
Mm-hmm.
And juniper is a very thick tree,
Mm-hmm.
and it has, well, it's painful
Yep.
to get through it. Like it can be actually thorns or juniper or something like that. That is beautiful. That gives you necessary shading from the sun,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, uh, that complicates the burglar's life.
Yep. I would agree. But there are very generic ways that how we put heightening survivability and lowering target possibility are able to be implemented. One of the things that I mean I advocate to students and other people too, and it's just a generic game that you can play inside your house, is practice low light proprioception. Can you find your way around the house in the dark? Do you know all the little nooks and crannies by heart? Um, can you find your way around the architecture in your house? Do you know the angles and the geometric shapes, barricades, obstacles, cover, concealment possibilities? Nobody should know your home base more effectively, innately, or efficiently than you. You should know these things. And it's not just the generic crap that we usually hear peddled, like, oh, I leave a stick by the door so that I always have a weapon. It is far more than that. It is knowing innately the advantages that you can take inside your house, in your yard, and while you're in your yard and the other person is outside your yard. Those are three elements that very few people cultivate. And for me personally, I take special care just because of that detail orientation in this thing where I can get to know my yard. And I mean those are things that can be done even through play. I mean, my son and I play hide and seek and tag and other games that we play in the yard, frisbee and dodgeball and things like that. And when you hide and seek and escape and evade, you start to know your property on a very personal level and how different things can be taken advantage of. I don't know what your take is on that, but me as a civilian, those are some very simplistic ways that low light or darkness proprioception, feeling your way around.
You know,
Uh,
I when I bought my apartment, I found out that a lamppost in the inner yard shines exactly in my kitchen window
mhm,
at night.
mhm,
So I dismantled kitchen door, because if you when you enter my apartment, the first thing is a kitchen to the right of you. So when low light, when you try to enter my house, my apartment, you just step in and immediately you are blinded by that lamppost, so your night vision is over.
Mm-hmm.
When your night vision is over, you need time to get accustomed again, and you will not be quiet as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I will hear you. Then I dismantle. Then I have a kind of a corridor to the main rooms, and the first thing you see again to the right, it's a living room.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think? That the very same lamppost shines in the windows of the living room as well. So I dismantle the doors to the living room. So when you still decide to go further, you are blinded once more.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I hear you.
But yeah, I mean, that leads me to even the tracking and tracing. I mean, if there is light, the TV light, and let's say my son is getting up in the middle of the night and coming from another room that's completely pitch black, the minute I see movement, I don't look at the movement. I look just off from the movement so that I can see um, so that I can see the image and the view of that thing coming towards me. I mean, those are little things that we can do that are evolutionarily planted. But I can see his form coming towards me in a much clearer way, knowing that I can't, television is blinding me and I have to look somewhat to the right or just above to focus on that image that's coming. So, I mean, understanding how vision works in the dark, uh, I
And
think
just
is an, go ahead.
and just occasionally, when we bought that apartment, we decided where should be a children's room or where should be our bedroom. We just compared the rooms and decided.
Mm-hmm.
But then I found out that talking about that corridor, um, our bedroom is after a small turn, and this turn is great for my main shooting hand.
Nice.
It was a coincidence, but I laughed out loud back in the day.
But those are little things that I think um, getting to know your house. I mean, the word I was looking for before was the silhouette. I mean, you can, when you're looking away and you've been blinded by light, you can see silhouettes by looking just off center. You
Yep.
can see shadows and shades and things like that by looking just a tad offline. And you refocus your night vision, even in the midst of having a bright light. So knowing that also means that you can manipulate it in other people. Um, but that whole idea of knowing your property better than other people. I mean, a lot of people don't know their property better than other people. I mean, how can you, it's not just the idea, what I was saying of architecture and angles and geometric shapes, but how can you utilize them to best advantage? How can you gain the advantage on another person that doesn't know them? What do angles factor in? Well, they take away vision. They give you a clean line of sight to target. They allow surprise attack. Uh, they prevent direct approach. Geometric shapes do the same. Barricades present a problem as well, especially in the dark. Barricades and obstacles prevent movement. They take away balance. Um, those are things that are a little more intricate when you've actually got somebody inside the house. Cover and concealment, how to gain the edge on somebody. I mean, the goal, if you have a home invader and you're on top of it, and you know he's there before he has a chance to do something, um, is the fact that you can gain the upper hand fast. And I mean, my goal in those situations is not to get in a fight. I don't want to fight anybody. The longer the fight goes, the more, the more chance there is of that big physical interaction, the greater the chance of something really bad happening, especially if my family is also there. So, I mean, all of these things give you an edge to gain the upper hand in a potential conflict, or potentially nullify that conflict before it happens. And knowing those things goes a long ways in preparing for that, and learning how to gain that upper hand. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on
Yep, as usual, I agree. And just for those guys who would call us paranoids, knowing your property is the best thing when you have to find something in a hurry.
that? Yeah, agreed. But even tools like flashlights, leaving them in strategic places, to me is far more imperative. Stealing somebody else's vision, stealing somebody else's cover and concealment, is far greater than blindly going out with a tool and not knowing what you're dealing with. So, I mean, light is a big friend, um,
Yeah, and the greatest enemy.
and the greatest enemy. Exactly. Now, when you start doing that layered thing where you start doing the dog alarm, the dog goes outside, you have the flashlight, you know the property better than other people. That's what we mean by layered defense. It's not just, okay, well, he has three different obstacles: the fish tank, the shark tank, the moat, and the crocodile pit that he has to get before he gets to the house. We're
Yeah,
talking about an accumulated problem where the more things that you have, the less chance there is of it being a quick hit for him or her or them. So, I mean, those are things, at least for me as a civilian, to pay attention to. I know how easy it is to get trapped in this yard. I know how problematic it is to escape this yard. However, I also know how to get into this yard and subvert those things, because there have been times where I've been locked out of the property and I've had to find ways in. So I know how to get in. I know where people will enter if they need to and they're desperate to get in. And I pay attention to the sounds. I know the sounds. I mean, this time of year, we have lots of chicharas that are buzzing during the year on the yard. And if those chicharas all of a sudden stop, there's generally a reason for it. Most often it's the neighborhood cats, or a dog, or what have you. But it's just one of those things, like you said, about paying attention to things. I don't find it paranoia, because heightening my senses is intriguing for me. I'm exhilarated by the chance to heighten my senses and know things that other people can't see. So for me, it's a pastime. It's not me being on guard all the time. I'm not jacked up and tuned in. Um, I'm not wired all the time. I'm quite the opposite, actually. I'm pretty relaxed all the time. But when it comes to a chance on knowing something more intimately, or honing senses, or understanding things that other people may not, it's a benefit. I enjoy it. So, I mean,
I
it's
can
all perspective on these things.
I can tell you an anecdote from also my personal life.
Shoot.
My mother-in-law has two dogs. One of them is rather a big shepherd who lives in the yard, and a smaller one, a toy terrier basically, who lives in the house. And as soon as the shepherd has access to all the yard, and the house has two entrances basically. When it barks, you cannot say definitely from where he does it,
Hmm.
because the dog is rather huge and he's very loud.
Hmm.
But the smaller one always runs to the closest entrance to the house to bark
Hmm.
alongside. So you can expect from where the guy should go. It's some small things about the correlation between different animals.
Yep. Yeah, we have a little dog too that's very barky and very aggressive and very territorial, which is a huge benefit. And one of the ways of keeping the property safe is that people that come on the property don't like that. And they expect me to reprimand the dog, and I don't. I reward him. I want him to be protective and defensive and territorial. I think it's a great benefit. I don't want him to bite some kid, but I'm also not going to steal those innate instincts out of him. He's a hunting dog and a protector dog. So I cultivate those things and know that they're let him know that they're worthwhile and valued, and he'll continue to do them. And he doesn't have to be a killer Rottweiler. He has to be an alarm dog that alerts me with just enough time that I have coherence to be able to handle what's coming, whatever it is. And I find that invaluable. He's my little alarm thing that goes off. One of the other things I was going to mention is self-propaganda. I mean, maybe this is taking this to a little bit different of a level, but when we go out into the neighborhood, or when I go out into the neighborhood, before it was to buy cigarettes or stop at the corner store to get a snack or walk down the street to get a six-pack for my wife and I on a hot summer day, I interact with people that I know from the neighborhood. And when we talk, I talk the same language. I merge, like we've discussed already. But I also mention to them when they're telling me about, oh, there was a break-in down the street and there's this gang that's been known to be breaking into houses left and right. I purposefully do the, wow, we need to look out for each other. I mean, community. I mean, this has to stop, and we need to support each other and keep each other on top of things. And we. I mean, it's an us versus them mentality with the neighbors. I mean, when you project that we're all in this together and they're these evil bastards, we're dehumanizing them with the intent that the neighbors know that we're all on the same page and they'll support us and alert us and keep us informed. And when you do nothing but piss off your neighbors, you cease having that line of information and that ability to shape their willingness to communicate with you. Continue?
Basically, divide and conquer.
Yeah, on a lower micro level, yeah. I mean, but it's not manipulating in the way that people think. I mean, it's for positive benefit. If I can provide them information as well, I will. I mean, it's not negative propaganda where I'm going, it's dually beneficial. But you as an outcast to that mutual benefit can be prevented from getting that knowledge and be kept up to base, kept up to par on neighborhood happenings. And if you're shut out and you lack that information, you're one step behind the curve. So why wouldn't you reach out and be authentic in some way? But it is a form of propaganda, and that you're planting that little, it's us versus them. I mean, they're bad. We have to stick together, and community and the lines of communication need to stay open, and that kind of mentality. You have anything else that you want to get into or add?
Basically, no. I guess I think we covered more or less.
What would you had said yesterday when we were talking about things along the lines of what to expose and what to hide. What would you hide?
I would have used curtains.
Yep.
As simple as that.
And draw them.
Just curtains or blinders or something like that.
I think there are other things, if you expand on that can be hidden. Valuables, exhibitions of money and big spending. I mean, that's a thing to hide too. I mean, if you're projecting that you have a ton of things all the time with which are worth stealing, you're putting a mark on your back. What to hide? Vision, accessibility. I mean, can they just enter your property? For us, it's not so easy. You have to be allowed into the property by somebody within here, unless you're doing it illegally. So, I mean, scoping out and just coming in casually are very difficult unless you have a specific purpose here. Vision, taking away vision and the ability to see inside, and thus being somewhat skeptical and it being a quick hit. Here, another thing is that you have to be extremely concerned with is, unlike in Canada and the States, where gardeners and maids are usually for well-off upper-class people, here they're not. They get paid minimally, and even middle and lower middle-class people have them. It's a little microeconomy where foreigners that move here from the surrounding nations become gardeners and maids, and those gardeners and maids know the property intimately. So that's an added threat here, in that those people have often been known to tell other people about best times, best accessibility points, fastest escape routes. So, I mean, planting that seed in those potential workers as well, that it's a high risk in some way, is also another element. You get where I'm going with that?
Yep. Also cannot contradict.
I mean, yeah, because security guards here, I mean, I often find that expats put a bigger mark on their back when they isolate themselves from the community. I mean, you don't talk to the locals, you don't speak the language, you only hang out with other like people, you put up big walls, and you have security outside. I find those people are more targeted than people like me, to be honest, and surprisingly for most people living in lower to lower middle class barrio, because there's resentment towards those people. They don't want to fit into the community. They don't want to be part of the community. And then they hire gardeners and maids and rip them off or pay them exorbitantly low rates. And then those are the people that filter information to other professionals that then come in and do the thing, whether it's security or maids or the gardener. So, I mean, I befriend the people that are also in those roles and interact with them and get along well with them and find out what information they're filtering and who else in the area that they know. And if they know that you know you're onto that information and you can pinpoint and be aware and coherent of it, they're less likely to take a risk.
Agreed.
The easiest thing to do is just pay them what they're worth and treat them like human beings. But hey, you know, that's an argument for a different time.
As we started our talk with, basically it's go inside the head of a burglar and make him think that it is not worth it.
Yes. This one is just, this element is just a little bit closer to home.
Yeah.
So anyways, you want to finish up or?
Why not? I guess we are covered.
Anything that you want to finalize on this?
Think before you do. Spend time on communication, because communication wins wars.
Agreed.
And try to look unvaluable or not worthy taking action.
Yep, I'm with you. So that'll be the end of the trilogy that we had here on blending and surveillance and residential security. We had talked about next week maybe doing psychological warfare from a civilian perspective, for those that mean to harm us. So I mean, that's something that we'll talk about during the week, but that could also be a very interesting topic that few people seem to broach. So again, it's been a pleasure. I find these
likewise
well worth the time to invest and butt heads and put heads together on, and we hope they're extremely informative for you guys. The take that we've tried to give is from a very grounded perspective and not the general hyperbole and panic, fear-mongering kind of mentality that we often see out there. So if the least we'd like to do is just put some ideas in your head. Make you,
I have just realized that we complemented each other because I'm from the apartment blocks world and you are from a private house world.
yes. Yeah, but that's been the case with every podcast that we've had, is that we each have a different perspective on this. We can come to consensus. We don't always. And that's kind of the joy of going through this, is that we complement each other and improve perspective. And you have a military perspective. I have a civilian one. We both live in undeveloped nations. Um, so, I mean, we have a different take on a lot of these things that other people may not be aware of. So I would like to continue with these as long as Oleg is willing as well. And hopefully people will see the value in this. So again, reach out if you want any more information from one of us or both of us on this, and we'd both be glad to share perspective.
Yep, it's great. It's the greatest pleasure. So,
Mine as well. Let's do it again next week.
of course,
Sounds good, brother. Have yourself a
yeah,
great weekend.
you too. Thank you.
Sounds good, man. Be safe.
You too.